The millionaire CEO and the little girl. The crystal chandelier cast diamond shadows across the marble floor of the Grand Heritage Hotel's dining hall, where 50 of the city's wealthiest families had gathered for the annual Children's Charity Gala. Among the sea of designer gowns and tailored suits, Marcus Wellington stood out not just for his imposing 6-foot frame, but for the way conversations seemed to pause when he entered a room. As the youngest CEO to ever lead Wellington Industries, a tech empire worth $3 billion, he was accustomed to commanding attention. But tonight, his attention was captured by something else entirely. In the corner of the opulent dining room, a small figure moved quietly between the tables, while other children her age were seated with their families, enjoying the 5-course meal prepared by Michelin-starred chefs. This little girl was methodically clearing away empty plates and glasses. Her worn sneakers squeaked softly against the polished floor, and her faded blue dress looked like it had been carefully mended more than once. What struck Marcus most wasn't her humble appearance, but the dignity with which she carried herself despite the cruel laughter echoing from a nearby table. "Look at the little servant girl," sneered Brandon Ashworth, the 12-year-old son of a prominent real estate mogul. His voice carried clearly across the room, causing several other privileged children to turn and stare. "I bet she's never even seen food this fancy before. My dad says people like her should be grateful we even let them work for us." The little girl's hands trembled slightly as she reached for an empty champagne flute, but she didn't respond. She simply continued her work, her dark eyes fixed firmly on her task. Marcus noticed how she carefully avoided making eye contact with the children, who were now openly pointing and whispering about her. "Her name is Sophie," came a gentle voice beside him. Marcus turned to see Eleanor Hartwell, the gala's organizer and a longtime family friend. Her expression was troubled as she watched the scene unfold. "She's 8 years old. Her mother works in our kitchen staff, and Sophie helps out during events to earn a little extra money for their family. She's one of the brightest children I've ever met." But Eleanor's voice trailed off as another round of laughter erupted from the children's table. Marcus felt something twist in his chest as he watched Sophie accidentally knock over a water glass while reaching across the table. The sound of shattering crystal seemed to amplify in the sudden silence that followed. The wealthy children erupted in mocking applause, with Brandon leading the charge. "Careful there, clumsy. That glass probably cost more than your house," Brandon called out, causing his companions to dissolve into giggles. Sophie's cheeks flushed crimson as she quickly knelt to gather the broken pieces, her small hands working frantically to clean up the mess. That's when Marcus saw something that would haunt him for weeks to come. Despite her obvious embarrassment and the tears beginning to well in her eyes, Sophie whispered a quiet, "I'm sorry," to the empty air. Not to the children who were mocking her, not to the adults who were pretending not to notice, but as if she believed she truly deserved their cruelty. Marcus Wellington had built his fortune by recognizing opportunity where others saw obstacles, but this moment required no business acumen. This was about basic human decency, something that seemed to be in short supply in his usual circles. Without a second thought, he strode across the room, his Italian leather shoes clicking purposefully against the marble floor. The laughter died instantly as Marcus approached the children's table. Brandon's smirk faltered when he looked up to see the towering figure of one of the city's most powerful men standing directly in front of him. The other children fell silent, suddenly very interested in their dessert plates. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation," Marcus said, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of steel. "I'm curious, Brandon, what exactly makes you better than Sophie?" Brandon's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. My dad owns half the buildings downtown, and we have 3 houses, and our car costs more than most people make in a year." "Interesting," Marcus interrupted. "So you're proud of things you had no hand in earning, things that were simply given to you." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Sophie here is working to help support her family. She's learning the value of hard work and responsibility while you're learning to mock those less fortunate than yourself. Who do you think is developing character?" The boy's face reddened, but he remained silent. Marcus continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the dining room. As conversations gradually ceased, and all attention focused on their table. "You know, I started with nothing," Marcus said, his tone shifting to something more conversational but no less powerful. "My father was a janitor, and my mother cleaned houses. I wore second-hand clothes to school and worked part-time jobs from the time I was 12. Children like you used to laugh at me too." He glanced around at the other young faces, seeing recognition and discomfort in their expressions. But those experiences taught me something invaluable that money can't buy: empathy, resilience, and the understanding that a person's worth isn't determined by their bank account. Sophie had finished cleaning up the broken glass and stood uncertainly nearby. Unsure whether to continue with her work or slip away from the attention, Marcus turned to her with a warm smile that transformed his usually serious features. "Sophie, would you mind joining me for a moment?" he asked gently. When she hesitated, he added, "You're not in any trouble. I'd just like to talk with you." Reluctantly, Sophie approached, her eyes darting nervously between Marcus and the silent children at the table. Marcus knelt down to her eye level, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by the watching adults who had begun to gather at the edges of the scene. "I hear you're quite bright," Marcus said softly. "What's your favorite subject in school?" "Mathematics," Sophie whispered, then added more boldly, "and science. I want to be an engineer someday, like the people who build bridges and design buildings that help people." A murmur of surprise rippled through the gathered crowd. Several parents exchanged glances, perhaps recognizing the ambitious dreams that their own children had never articulated so clearly. "That's a wonderful dream," Marcus replied, his voice carrying genuine warmth. "Do you know what I do for work?" Sophie shook her head, her curiosity beginning to overcome her nervousness. "I run a technology company. We design and build systems that help make people's lives better. We create software that helps doctors save lives, programs that help teachers educate students, and applications that connect families across the globe." He paused, studying her interested expression. "It sounds like we might have similar goals." The room was completely silent now, with every guest straining to hear this unexpected conversation. Marcus stood and addressed the crowd, his voice carrying the authority that had made him successful in boardrooms across the world. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're here tonight for a charity gala, supposedly to help children in need. But charity isn't just about writing checks and feeling good about ourselves. Real charity, real change, starts with how we treat the people right in front of us." He placed a gentle hand on Sophie's shoulder. "This young lady has shown more grace under pressure tonight than many adults I know." While she was being mocked and humiliated, she continued working with dignity and purpose. She didn't respond to cruelty with cruelty. She didn't let embarrassment stop her from doing her job. Those are the qualities of a true leader. Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out his business card, kneeling again to hand it to Sophie. "I want you to keep this. When you're ready to go to college, when you need internships or guidance in engineering, I want you to call me. Not because I feel sorry for you, but because I recognize potential when I see it." Sophie's eyes widened as she carefully took the card, handling it like the precious thing it had suddenly become. "Really?" she whispered. "Really," Marcus confirmed. "But I have one condition." Sophie nodded eagerly. "Never let anyone make you feel small because of where you come from or what you don't have. Your worth isn't determined by your parents' job or the size of your house. It's determined by your character, your dreams, and your willingness to work toward them. Can you remember that?" "Yes, sir," Sophie said, her voice stronger now, standing a little taller. Marcus stood and turned back to the children's table, where Brandon and his companions sat in uncomfortable silence. "As for you young people, you have an opportunity here. You can choose to continue down a path that values only wealth and status, or you can learn to see the potential in everyone around you. The choice will define not just the kind of children you are, but the kind of adults you'll become." The evening took on a completely different tone after that moment. Parents who had been ignoring the situation suddenly found themselves in deep conversations with their children about privilege and responsibility. Several families approached Sophie throughout the evening, not with pity, but with genuine interest in her story and her dreams. Eleanor Hartwell, who had been watching the entire scene unfold, announced that the evening's charity auction would include a new item: a full scholarship fund dedicated to supporting promising young students from working families who demonstrated exceptional character and potential. The bidding was fierce, ultimately raising over $200,000. But the most significant change happened at the children's table. Brandon, clearly struggling with what he had witnessed, eventually approached Sophie as she continued her work. His earlier bravado had completely disappeared. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, his words barely audible over the dinner conversation around them. "What I said was mean and stupid. You don't deserve that." Sophie looked up at him, and for a moment, Marcus thought she might simply ignore the apology. Instead, she nodded gracefully. Thank you for saying that. It takes courage to admit when you're wrong. Her mature response seemed to affect Brandon more than any lecture could have. He stood there for a moment longer, then asked, Would you maybe want to sit with us for dessert? I mean, if you're done working. Sophie glanced toward the kitchen, where her mother was likely finishing the evening's preparations. I should help my mom clean up first, but maybe after that. I'll help, Brandon said suddenly, surprising everyone including himself. I mean, if that's okay. I don't really know how to clear tables, but I could learn. Within minutes, 3 other children from the wealthy families had joined them, turning the cleanup process into an impromptu team effort. Parents watched in amazement as their privileged children learned to stack dishes and wipe down tables, laughing and chatting with Sophie as if she had always been part of their group. Marcus watched this transformation with a satisfaction that went far deeper than any business deal he had ever closed. This was the kind of return on investment that couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. As the evening wound down, Sophie's mother, Maria, approached Marcus with tears in her eyes. She was a small woman with calloused hands and the same quiet dignity that her daughter possessed. Mr. Wellington, she said in accented English, I don't know how to thank you for what you did tonight. Your daughter thanked me by being exactly who she is, Marcus replied. She's remarkable, Maria. With the right opportunities, there's no limit to what she could achieve. Maria nodded, clutching Sophie's hand tightly. She studies every night by candlelight sometimes when we can't pay the electric bill. She checks out library books about engineering and reads them over and over. I always tell her that education is the one thing no one can take away from you. You're raising her right, Marcus said. And I meant what I said about staying in touch. When she's ready for college, for internships, for guidance, I'll be there. 6 years later, Marcus received a handwritten letter at his office. The return address was from Sophie Martinez, now 14 years old and at the top of her class at one of the city's most prestigious magnet schools for science and technology. The letter was accompanied by a photograph of a bridge she had designed and built as part of a school project, along with a first-place certificate from the state engineering fair. Dear Mr. Wellington, the letter began, you probably don't remember me, but 6 years ago you changed my life at a charity dinner. I was the little girl clearing tables, and you stood up for me when other children were being mean. You told me never to let anyone make me feel small because of where I come from. I wanted you to know that I haven't forgotten those words, not for a single day. The letter went on to describe her academic achievements, her acceptance into a summer engineering program at MIT, and her continued dream of becoming a civil engineer specializing in infrastructure for underserved communities. But what moved Marcus most was the final paragraph. I want to build bridges, Mr. Wellington, not just out of steel and concrete, but between people. I want to create opportunities for other kids like me, kids who might be overlooked because of where they come from or how much money their families have. You showed me that one person standing up can change everything, and someday I want to be that person for someone else. Thank you for seeing potential in me when others only saw a poor little girl. I hope I can make you proud. Marcus kept that letter framed on his desk for the rest of his career. It served as a daily reminder that true success isn't measured by the wealth you accumulate, but by the lives you touch and the potential you help others realize. Years later, when Dr. Sophie Martinez became the youngest person ever to receive the National Medal of Engineering for her innovative designs that brought clean water and reliable infrastructure to communities around the world, Marcus was there in the audience, beaming with pride. During her acceptance speech, she told the story of a charity dinner where a powerful man chose to see her not as someone to be pitied or ignored, but as someone with unlimited potential. Success, she told the distinguished audience, isn't about where you start. It's about having the courage to dream big, work hard, and most importantly, lift others up as you climb. We all have the power to change someone's life simply by choosing to see their worth when others might look right through them. The ripple effects of that one evening continued for decades. Brandon Ashworth grew up to become a philanthropist who focused on educational opportunities for underprivileged children, often saying that a single moment of accountability changed the entire trajectory of his life. The scholarship fund established that night supported hundreds of students over the years, many of whom went on to achieve remarkable things in their fields. But perhaps the most important change was in the way people began to see those around them. Parents started teaching their children to look beyond surface appearances and economic status. Teachers began recognizing and nurturing potential in students who might have been overlooked. Employers started creating programs to identify and develop talent from all backgrounds. Marcus Wellington's legacy wasn't just the technology company he built or the billions he accumulated. It was the understanding that everyone deserves to be seen, valued, and given the chance to reach their potential. It was the recognition that true power lies not in what you can take, but in what you can give. The little girl clearing tables that night had needed someone to believe in her. The wealthy children had needed someone to show them a better way to use their privilege. The adults in the room had needed a reminder that charity begins with how we treat the people right in front of us. And Marcus had needed to remember that his greatest achievements wouldn't be measured in quarterly reports, but in the lives he chose to touch with kindness, dignity, and hope. Sometimes the most profound changes begin with the simplest choice, to see another person's humanity and respond to it with compassion. That night at the Grand Heritage Hotel, a millionaire CEO made that choice, and in doing so, he discovered that the greatest return on investment isn't financial at all. It's the immeasurable value of giving someone the chance to believe in themselves. What did you think of Sophie's incredible journey from clearing tables to changing the world? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear about a time when someone believed in you or when you chose to see potential in others. If this story inspired you, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. Don't forget to subscribe to Trillionaire in Love for more powerful stories about compassion, success, and the moments that change everything. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads. Remember, you have the power to change someone's life today. Sometimes all it takes is choosing to see their worth. Until next time, keep spreading love and lifting others up.